I'm going to give everybody a chance to sort of introduce themselves. But one thing that I wanted to start with is, how did y'all end up here? Can you give me a little 411 on how you ended up here? Let's start with Laura.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. It's good to connect with the fellow panelists as well as everybody online. My name is Laura Teclamariam. I'm the Director of Product Management for Warner Brothers Mobile Games. I'm leadership for the San Francisco studio. So if you like Harry Potter games, DC games on mobile platform, I'm your gal. And I have 2 other titles under my studio that are in incubation and development. So with that said, how did I get into gaming? Is that the question?
Yeah, how did you get
The short answer is, so I started through tech. My humble beginning starts with being a software engineer at Microsoft. Then I went into consulting. It's a very tech traditional background. Then I launched my own startup for about 6 years, spent every dime I made at Microsoft, and then pivoted again to go work for a Sequoia capital funded startup called Tapjoy. And that's where I started building ad tech for video games. And really understanding monetization design. Then I went to go work for EA, built like a handful of games there for about 5 years. And then I went to go work for Glue, built another handful of games at Glue. And then I came to Warner Brothers and now am part of studio leadership at Warner Brothers.
Look at that. That's a whew, I need a breather just for that breath of air. Trey, what about you?
Sure. Yeah, I'm listed as Robert there on the card there, but feel free to call me Trey. I am a technical program manager at Niantic, specifically for our Pokemon Go game. Super fun. I'm a huge player myself, and I manage about 2 engineering pods there. It turns out to be a team of about 12 of us. So where did I start in gaming? So I graduated UC Berkeley when most of my colleagues were interested in accounting, banking, consulting, and I was like, no, I want to do video games. So I went straight for Ubisoft. Started off as an internship there, and then started to roll in full time doing product development and partnerships. So most of the ads and other third-party content that you see going into games like Far Cry or Watch Dogs or Assassin's Creed or some of the stuff that we helped generate. Also worked on consumer products there for a while and helped Ubisoft build 2 of the first VR titles that they created, Star Trek Bridge Crew and Werewolves Within. From there, moved over to Microsoft, where I was working on HoloLens for a little bit, and also helped with their 3DFE ecosystem. And after that, I landed at Niantic, where I started to work on Pokemon Go with Trinidad.
Hey, I'm excited about that. Thank you, Trey. But last but surely not least, Jessica, hit me with what you got.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here. So hi, I'm Jess. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Wicked Saints Studios. So we make games that are wickedly fun and actively good. So we have a game. If you want to go check out some of our games, we have Pitfall right now, which is a text-based game you can play for free. And then we also have Pathways. So we currently have a Kickstarter for it. 2 days left, everybody. And so basically what it is, it's a mobile game. It's a mobile interactive story game where you can practice being a hero and dealing with conflict. So how to be an anti-racist, how to interact with when a bullying situation, any kind of conflict. And so we'll give kids ways to practice dealing with conflict, and then we'll give them ways to actually be a hero in real life. And so how did I get here? So my path is a little bit different. For the last 7 years, I've been an international peace builder. Before that, it started with doing awareness campaigns. So doing storytelling and strategic messaging around things like domestic abuse, child abuse, sexual abuse, all those kind of things. Ended up winning a few awards in my younger years and went over to work for Search for Common Ground, which is the world's largest dedicated peace building organization. There, I ran their comms department for a while, started doing some capacity building in the field for storytelling. And pretty soon I was doing social change communication trainings in the field in some of the most hostile places on the planet, training young activists how to strategically tell stories to shift attitudes and behavior. And through that process, we know that people don't change their behavior based on giving them information. It changes through experiences. So storytelling is a powerful way to do that. And I believe an even more powerful way is through storytelling and gameplay. So this is why we're using interactive story games, because you're not vicariously living through another character. You are the main character within a game, and you get to choose how to respond and then experience the consequences of those decisions, but in a safe, fun environment. So yeah, that's how I got here.
Wow. So just so y'all know who I am, I'm the head of diversity and inclusion at Niantic. I fell into the game industry. I'm here to disrupt the industry culture for good. So get ready. Ask about me. No, I'm joking. Just kidding. So I'm curious to know how much did you know about the game industry before tapping into it? I know that Trey, you mentioned that you knew exactly that you wanted to do this. And I'd love to know the thought process around that. Like what made you understand that, like, I just want to do this? Like, what in your mind?
So it took me a while to actually figure out where I could fit in with the video game industry. When I first thought about it being an interesting, even an inkling of a possibility in my mind, I'd seen E3, I grew up being a gamer, I watched all of the trailers, and my perception was that you had to be a programmer or a designer, and that there was a very strict set of roles that you could pick up when you got into the game industry. And as I got into school and college, I started to realize that there were a lot more avenues to get there. You can come in via accounting, you can come in finance, you can come in marketing, in PR, and QA. There's so many different ways to get there. And I sort of found my home in product management and producing and program management, just by sort of trying my hand at a lot of different things and seeing how it worked out. So there's a lot of trial and error, but I will say for anyone who doesn't know what it's like to be in the game industry or to know what roles are available, that's kind of normal. It does take some time to figure out where you will fit best in that space.
Ooh, I want to hear from the vet. Laura, you said you had your own startup. You were at you were all over the place in a good way. What was your passion behind this?
Awesome. So for me, the last 20 years has been about finding where technology and entertainment intersect. And I started that journey in music. That was my startup. It was like television, film, and music. And then I said, I think, television, film, and music is great, but I felt like I really wanted to skew more towards the tech side. And so I ended up going into video games through the ads lens, because this is like, not to date myself, but this is like when Twitter was like barely new. I mean, Google was just like being founded. I think like Facebook was still in college at Harvard. Like, I mean, if you think back to early 2000, when you think about where the role that games played, it was, I think I want to say like PlayStation 2 was what everybody should have been on. PlayStation 2. I don't think Xbox existed, so everybody was on 360. I want to say, depending on like your age, some of these platforms might resonate. So for me, I started on the heels of the 2800 on the Atari and the NES, and so games were always part of my kind of passion-led projects. But I didn't know I wanted to go into games until I said I want to go really on like building applications, like tech entertaining applications. And Netflix didn't exist yet. Spotify, Pandora, like all these platforms came after the fact. So I saw like games as that vehicle to have technology and entertainment really merge together.
I absolutely adore that. And one thing that was interesting, Jess, that you were talking about is you realized, what was that aha moment where you realized I need to make a game to create social impact?
So,
sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just, I mean, there was a couple different things that happened. So one, we had put out a gamified app. So it wasn't really a game. It was a gamified app. It was called Battle for Humanity, where where youth could go on and choose a mission to do in real life. and then get points for doing that mission in real life. So they'll go do it, take a picture of themselves doing it in real life, upload it into the game, and we would give them battle points. It would have a pre-populated hashtag for it, and connect everyone else around the world that were doing it, and had marked. It was all great. And so we did that, and what we found was that even though most of the young people wanted to go out and do something in the real world, and they had that on their profile, very few of them would actually go out and do something. And what we ended up finding is it was that they lacked self-efficacy, which is your belief in your own ability to accomplish your goal. And one incredible place to build self-efficacy is actually through gameplay. So there's all these studies about it. So while this was going on and we're getting feedback from the pilot where kids are like, I just want to be able to practice this stuff first before being asked to do it. I was also doing a violence prevention training in Boston it had gang members there, it had police officers and all these kind of things. And it was 3 days long. And I kept waiting in the 3 days for the trainers to tell people what to do. And they never did. All they did was take people through scenarios and ask them what they would do in the scenario. And it was incredible to see how people were transformed over 3 days of no one telling them what to do, but just being able to think of themselves and what they would do in these different situations. And so those kind of things combined with me going to play YNC and play NC. So I totally probably just butchered that, but you know what I'm talking about probably, hopefully. I went there and I saw that games don't have to be these fancy AAA games, that even like there's text-based games, there's all these different ways that you can build games that aren't super expensive. And so that's what kind of like launched, so all those things together is like, oh my gosh, we should make an interactive story game and this is gonna be awesome. And that's what kind of took us from there.
I love that. And one thing that I was wondering when you were talking is, how do you build for inclusivity? That would be the ice cream man in the background. But,
yes.
But one question is, when you decided to start to build these games, and what's intriguing me is the social piece, the fact that you're looking at, you're doing the work. Like, you know what you're talking about. So now you're building this in a game. How do you build for inclusivity? How do you, and that's internally and externally for your audience?
So me go again?
Yeah, you go again.
Okay, that was just double checking. So yeah, so I mean, the thing is, the whole point of our game is to like bridge young people across differences, right? Like across divides, whether they're differences around race, religion, politics. It's all, we're trying to, give young people the tools so that they can attack the problem instead of each other, so that they know what to do if they're in a bullying situation, or if someone's yelling, racist, hateful stuff to somebody next to them, like how to actually intervene in a way. If you respond aggressively, the chances of retaliation is really high. Passively, people do nothing. So all those, but there's all these different ways you can respond between those two ways of passive and aggressive. So it's really important that we're inclusive in every aspect. And I think for one, I think sometimes people think being inclusive is a chore that like has to be done. But I really believe that difference is a pathway to innovation. And so the more different point of views and different experiences you can get, you'll actually look at a problem differently and find solutions differently. So I actually believe you'll produce a better product when you are more inclusive. Some of the things that I've heard is that, well, if you make a game that's inclusive for everyone, half the country is not going to want to be on it. And I beg to differ. And so I think that the entertainment factor is huge on that, right? So, I mean, they said the same thing about, Black actors in movies, and then Black Panther comes out and just like blows everything up. So I think entertainment factor is huge. And so we're trying to lead with that. And some of the ways that we're trying to be inclusive, especially while our budget is low, is we're using young people as advisors. So, I have university students at Cambridge Peace Education Program. I also have them at the local community college here that I'm working with, and some of the rural kids and some of the inner city kids. And so really bringing them in, because it's their stories that we'll be telling. And so it's important that they have input into this process. And of course, there's a lot more ways that we should be building pipelines for inclusivity. They don't have enough people of color in the room, but it's about thinking about the people that can't get into the room, and how we're able to create a pipeline so that they can.
So thank you for that. I actually want to give Laura and Trey a chance to sort of comment on that topic, because I feel like with Laura, you've built so many games from the ground up, and I'm pretty sure that this is something that's top of mind for you. How do you consider this?
It's a great question. So kind of, speaking just from my own personal and professional experience, and not necessarily on behalf of any company, there are a lot of decisions that are made in games. And so my journey in games have been one of like very lucrative IP, very like brands and narratives and stories. I've worked on Star Wars, I've worked on Mirror's Edge, Catalyst, I have game credits on FIFA 16, PVZ2, on Disney Sorcerer's Arena, on Harry Potter. So, just having worked on these very big franchises, there's a lot of context preset in those IP. So, it's not like I can just create characters that don't exist in those licensing or in those narratives, right? But what you have to do from a social impact is think about the entire representation that IP has. And, for example, one around gender, like, most IP will have female characters versus male characters. And so making sure that there's a healthy balance of representation, that's just one aspect. And that's the type of decision-making lens I want to make sure that our team has as a leader. So, is this going to resonate not just with one audience, but with as many audiences as we can? And those lenses are through gender, through race, through, orientation, like you name it. And so the more points of view we can have in our game, then the more our players will resonate with that product. And so that's the philosophy I've always stood by.
Thank you, Laura.
Sure. So yeah, I think that Jess, by the way, your work is warming my heart. It's like, I'm feeling it. I think that there's a lot of impacts that diversity has on the practicality of the way that we make games, right? Like if you look at, some basic systems that exist in your game, you may have an avatar system, you may have a dialogue system, all of those things, if you don't have diverse perspectives in your workplace, how you build those systems may leave out inherently large portions of your audience. And when those audiences are not engaged, then you're limiting yourself from a business standpoint of who can be involved in your business, who can be involved in your brand, who can interact with your game, and who feels invited into your game. And that's really important, is that invitation has to be there for everyone. I think, to Jess's point, games have the ability to create a broader impact than just the entertainment factor. It can help us to learn things. It can help us to grow, to become more emotionally intelligent, to become more empathetic because of the level of interactivity that games bring to us. And so even more so than a medium that's not interactive, that diversity and perspective is important, because the impact that games have on people, in my opinion, is that much more impactful.
Thank you, Trey. So this is a topic it's pretty hot right now because of everything that's going on in the world. I'm going to call out the elephant in the room, being that you're all Black developers in this space, has there been any barrier to entry? What have your experiences been? Because I believe everybody's is very unique and different and unique to themselves, but what has that experience been when you came in? And let's start with Trey.
To me, they were very subtle. The challenges and barriers that I faced coming into the industry were cultural and systemic, in the sense that many folks, if you're white or Asian, you have people around you who have access to the tech community. Maybe your family member is, your friends are, you have that infrastructure built in around you to help you understand the space, the problems, the challenges, the solutions, even some things down to how you talk about things can be very coded in a way that just doesn't match your upbringing or your culture or your background. So in that sense, some of those challenges were hard for me to overcome in the beginning of my career. And even as I'm in my career, there is an aspect of, I don't want to call it whitewashing, but you have to sort of play in the arena in a way that makes sense for the audience you're talking to, right? So there is some code switching that happens in that space that you have to get used to. And if in some cases, if you're not skilled in how to present yourself that way, people may not understand you. They may interpret things that you do or say in a different way than your other colleagues who say the same thing, but in a different way. So there are definitely some challenges. I would say mine have been more subtle than overt. There are trade-offs to each of those. The subtle ones are a little bit harder to identify and address, but the overt ones probably slap you in the face a little bit harder.
I totally hear you. And I hear like that if you don't understand the environment that you're entering into, it could be a blocker.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, do you have any opinion on this topic?
So, what I'd say is, because I think things have changed since I've gotten in the industry and like where things are now. So I don't want to talk about like, 15 years ago, you would have done it this way, because I don't think that's relevant. What I'd say now is that in terms of like what's important in getting in is really being determined to learn. There's a lot of resources in the gaming industry that I think were not available when I first got in, like things like Black in Gaming as an organization, being able to know that they have funding resource for diverse like developers for GDC. Like GDC is a game developer conference which costs $2,000 to go to, and when you're an indie startup or maybe you don't have a job and you're trying to get into the industry, that's a pretty lofty price. Plus you have like this conference, I'm sure it costs to attend this conference, in the past. So resources like that, where you could just reach out to people and different organizations to help you get the knowledge, I think is one of the biggest hurdles that I know I had to overcome. And I think that still becomes a barrier today to getting access to the information. Because the stuff I know now after 15 years of being in the mobile gaming business and console, like the games I make now and the way I look at games are completely different from when I first got into the industry. And like now I can see a game if it's gonna be a hit or not. Whereas when you're first starting, you're just trying to figure out like, what's a gameplay mechanic? Like, how do I learn about design? How do I talk to somebody to be a developer? And like, there's all these nuances you're still learning. So I'd say keep that hunger up and go find the resources. The second is a two-part answer. Apologies. The second one is role modeling. Finding a role model in sponsorship has been a very challenging thing, even for me in this like executive juncture. But I think it's really important for each of us who are listening in and tuning in, and those of us on the panel, is to find those role models and find those sponsors and mentors to like help you get to your goal like faster. You can bump your head less if you have a role model and a mentor and a sponsor to really just guide you along your journey.
So I'm still on you, Laura. In light of everything that's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, COVID, pandemic, where do you see the game industry going?
It's a great question. So I like to start off, like those of people who like get to know me, just like thinking about the numbers, right? So when you look at Black gamers and, just looking at the racial tension that's been in the country and just like very focused in on gaming, Black gamers, I think like there was a Pew study that said that like when you look at protagonists, white protagonists were prevalent in the top 50 games. I think this was like a 2014 study, while like 67% was represented for Black and Asian characters. And I think 3% when look at like how active Black not building games that, you know, have characters or have narratives that are reflective of that 89%, that's an opportunity lost, and that's a market lost in revenue. So when, you know, again, I'm not the crystal ball holder, but, you know, I try to look at things with matter of fact and like, is this good business? And so when I look at Nielsen's, you know, like 2018 report, when they talk about, you know, the digital lives of Black consumers, I mean, what we're expected to grow 1 to 1.5 trillion dollars. So if, you know, you think about that population alone, and I think it's like 77% of the census of Black census says they play video games. Like, why wouldn't you want games to represent that demographic so you could tap into that consumerism? So that's what I say to kind of the industry, which is, hey, you know, you regardless of what side you're on, as like, you know, of the BLM movement, it still is good business sense if you have a product that you want to sell. And it should be representative of all walks of life, and definitely the Black walk of life, because we're in numbers, like the data is there. And so that's my stance, and that's what I communicate at the executive level.
Thank you, Laura. That was some good data and facts. So to keep that conversation going, Jess, how do we encourage a long-term, hyper-intensive approach to dismantling the systemic racism that we've seen? I know that's a pretty deep one, but like, being that you were a peacemaker in these streets, what would you say is, especially like in the game studio, how would we keep that focus?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Laura's on the right track. And so the thing is to focus on your shared interests, right? So the goal in peace building is really simple. You focus on shared interests instead of separate positions. And so shared interest is to make a profit. So, you know, everything that Laura's saying right now makes a lot of sense. You know, also advocating that this is actually good, you know, so if like this is a major demographic that is your audience, as your customer, then shouldn't you bring in people that have similar experiences to help build these games and help start doing these narratives and everything that, so it just makes good business sense. So focusing on that shared interest is great. Again, you know, the issue with trying to looking at those around us that have access to the room and those of us that don't have access to the room. And so there's some of us that are people of color that are kind of pre-qualified because you graduated from Harvard, MIT, or something else like that. But there's a lot of young people that are extremely talented that don't have any access and don't have any exposure to this kind of career or any opportunity in it. And so there's a lot of things that companies can do. It could be as simple as opening up tours so that, you know, young people, disadvantaged young people can come in and see what it's like and open their engineers, you know, like Trey, so they can come talk to someone like Trey and be like, wow, like here's a Black man, you know, that's leading this team and doing all this stuff as an engineer. This is amazing, you know? And so creating that kind of access is great. There's some organizations that are already doing some of this. I know Dreamcore Tech is trying to create that pipeline for people of color that don't have access to actually build these skills. Paid internships are also huge. So I was a scholarship athlete that went to a state university. And if I didn't have a paid internship in Washington, D.C., you know, there was no way I would have gotten there. And so, you know, and that's something that I felt guilt over years, even in the NGO sector. So even in the nonprofit sector, we have unpaid internships. And I'm looking at all these resumes, and like these kids, you know, you go to Georgetown, they already have 3 internships under their belt. And we're asking them to work 20 to 30 hours a week as an internship. If you cannot eat, you have to choose between eating or having an internship if you're from a low-income household. And so paid internships would also be a good way to move this up. So yeah, so hopefully, sorry I was rambling there, but there's a lot of things that we could be doing right now to help build this pipeline and help build this exposure, and it's in everyone's best interest.
Thank you.
Trinidad, can I speak on that?
Come on, Trey. Come on.
So yeah, I agree with both Laura and Jess on both of those points. The way that I look at it is as a funnel, and I look at two distinct parts of that funnel. The first is at the opening part, which I think Jess really talked on, and it has a lot to do with exposure and allowing these young underrepresented talent to know that there is an avenue for them to get to this space. And I think that is a huge part of it, is these folks do not see themselves in these places. They do not see themselves where we are now, sitting at the table. And so it's important to reach out to those folks and build that relationship, even as early as high school, as junior high, to tell them that you have a place here, and show them the path. When we talk about the 400 years of systemic racism that specifically Black folks have faced, and other minorities have their own experiences, you may have 400 years of one person's generations never having seen an opportunity. And so imagine if that's your entire life, that's all that you know, but you've never had a chance to be able to see something outside of that very limited scope, right? The other side of the funnel that I think about is on the recruiting side, and internally at companies. I think there's a big effort right now for companies to focus on adding diversity across the board, which is great, but it doesn't mean a whole lot unless we dig into those numbers a little bit more. What does diversity look like function by function, discipline by discipline? If you're funneling all of your diversity hires into one space, is that really diversity? If your decision makers, if your influencers, your writers, your people who are telling the story to people don't have that seat at the table, is that really diversity? And I think that's a question we really have to ask ourselves.
Thank you so much for that, Trey. Does anybody have anything to add? Because I mean, I'm on fire over here. I'm just like, we need to tell everybody about this panel, because so there's some people spitting some truth. So we have a good 10 minutes left. Just time check. And I'd like to pose this question to all of you. For anyone watching, what are some of the best practices that you've seen in your career that you can just share with them around being authentically yourself in this space, but then also moving up the ladder, or this whatever that ladder is? Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, I'll go for it.
Sorry. I thought I was paused. Sorry, I would.
No, I was waiting. So obviously I'm very, very new, and I think it's interesting because I'm right in the middle of it right now, trying to overcome some of these preconceived notions and assumptions as a Black founder. So I haven't made it quite yet. And it's hard to, because like I had mentioned before, when you have kind of, you're pre-qualified. And what I've found is sometimes I am asked to speak a lot of places, and I do speak a ton of places over, lots of different industries. But when it comes time to funding a project or idea, there's where I get the silence. And so I still think that I'm still in the middle of trying to figure out how do I do this. And for a while, I didn't know if it was because I was young or a woman or a person of color, or that I'm from the West Coast, a small town, West Coast town. So I got this like Valley Girl thing going on. So maybe that's what it is, But it's a challenge because I have this way to make people feel comfortable, but will they still trust that I'm capable? And if they go back and they look through my resume and they look through my awards and building departments and, you know, building methodology and frameworks and all of that. But people really don't take the time to do that. And so I'm still in this space of trying to figure out how to authentically be myself. And still gain the respect needed to get the funds to build the projects or get that kind of, where people really truly believe you and take your words seriously. Because that's something else as well. And I think that some of it is with presentation, but there's definitely some hurdles to jump over and kind of find your way through. And so I don't know if anyone else has had similar experiences on the panel.
Laura, what about you?
I was gonna go last, but I can crack this question open. You know, so I think my fellow panelists, Jessica and Robert, talk about like pedigree, and it's interesting. Pedigree in the gaming industry is not, you know, definitely there's education, but I think there's a very specific lens that happens in gaming. It's all about track record. What games have you worked on and have launched that are successful? And that has been the lens that I've used in my career for progression and for development and future opportunities. So I look at the game or the project that I'm on and I'm like, I evaluate it like, how successful do I think this project's going to be? What are my contributions to it? You know, what kind of team, what kind of culture does it have? And every time I've made a decision to join a game team, that's the lens that I use, because I know that when the titans, if you will, of gaming, when they look at decisions, they're going to look at people who have a track record of success, specifically in games. So my advice to people out there listening in is that if you look at your resume or your kind of gaming career and you're like, man, what am I doing wrong? Or like, why aren't things going the way I would like them to? Is like, look at your track record and what you've worked on. If you don't have experience working on big, massive scaled games, but yet, you like want to figure out how to solve for them, like go apply to like a big company. Like Jessica says, she's working in mobile, so she's understanding like the mobile genre and that her domain expertise is in mobile. I think like Trey, you also went in, I think, did all of us go through the mobile lens? Oh, is that fair to say?
I took part console.
Okay. Yeah, I did console too. But it is track record. Like people will hire you because they know, oh man, you worked on that game and that game was a $200 million game. Can you come work over here with us? Because we know you understand that system design, or we know you understand that narrative story. We know you understand how to, do the monetary business model around that. We know you understand the marketing aspect. We know you know how to hire talent and retain talent. Whatever the job function is, it's about track record. So I would say that's been my lens of kind of pursuing career ambitions. And really, like, that's the pedigree that you need in games. Maybe that will evolve, but I think that's very important and helpful. And again, if you're Black, please connect with Black in Gaming. You can go to blackandgaming.com. There's a lot of resources in that organization to help you get aspects of this conversation and to get the mentorship that you're looking for.
Thank you. Trey, do you have anything to add? And leave me 2 minutes because I want to ask y'all one more question.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I think Laura is right on point there. While in the broader tech community, you might see a bit more of a focus on what school you went to, whether you have a graduate degree, etc. In the gaming space, it is really a lot about who you know and what you've been able to put down on paper that you say you've done. The first job that I got out of college was because I was able to connect with a professor who connected with a friend who connected with someone else, and then I was able to work my way in. So again, I want to mirror what Laura said about making those connections because they're going to be really important. And the last part is, I got my job at Niantic because my manager now was like, oh, you worked on Star Trek Bridge Crew? I love that game. I want to work with that guy who worked on that game. That's awesome. So, even if you have to start off small and you just kind of claw your way into something, ship something. That matters.
Ooh, I like that quote, ship something that matters. Okay, we have 3 minutes, and you talked about connecting. I'd love to know how I can connect with each one of you. And also, if there's any organizations that you partner with, that would be great for people to know about. So let's start with Jessica.
Yes, so there's lots of ways to connect. So you can go to wickedsaints.studio if you want to learn more about our game and our approach. We're building out a pretty cool team. And so if you want to learn more about Pathways and the game that we're having right now, you can go to our Kickstarter. So just go to Kickstarter, type in Pathways or Wicked Saints, and you will find us. And then you can, of course, find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. It's Jessica Murrey with an E, so therefore I'm a little bit easier to find than the typical Murray. But yeah, always looking for ways to connect and to collaborate. And our game is also going to be partnering with youth organizations that do positive works in their community. So 50 cents of every dollar spent within our games will actually go to support a youth charity or a youth leader that's doing good in the world. So it's pretty fun.
Thank you, Jessica. Trey, how can I get a hold of you? Where you at?
I'm on LinkedIn 100%. And the way to find me is through Trey Williamson. I also, similar to Jessica, I'm on the board of a nonprofit that's dedicated towards helping survivors of domestic violence here in the Pacific Northwest in the Seattle Bellevue region. So Jessica, let's connect and see if we can do some games for good or something. See, that's how you do it, folks.
That's awesome.
You find the common ground, you find the common interest, and you just go for it.
And Laura.
Awesome. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm using my other last name, so it's Laura Wright 99. And no, that's not the year I graduated, but it means something else. So Laura Wright 99 on Twitter, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Laura Teclamariam on LinkedIn, and also my website, laurateclamariam.com. And last, so I'm on the board. I talked about Black in Gaming, but also definitely want to give a shout out to Game Heads. I'm on the board of Game Heads, and they're a nonprofit focused on bringing Black and brown faces into the gaming industry, starting from like middle school all the way through post-college and getting them into the industry. So love the work that both those organizations are doing, and good luck with everybody. Stay committed, and definitely play a Warner Brothers game. And spend if you can. Quick shout out.
play Harry Potter Wizards Unite.
Harry Potter Wizards Unite. There you go.
And Niantic Games. I am Trinidad Hermida. My Twitter, IG, Twitch, Discord name is this is Trini. I think on Discord or on Twitch I am Trini. But holler at your girl. I'm all about this movement. I'm all about people coming together, and we really need to connect in order to make this world a better place. So thank you for your time. Please reach out to us if you have questions, and I look forward to hearing more from every single person here. Thank you all for joining us. I'm so honored to be in this chat with you, and continue to shine.
Thank you, Trinidad.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Nice meeting you all.